The New York City rulebook has 12,000 pages in it on how business should operate. And last year, the city decided to try and simplify that and release an AI, generative AI chatbot for business owners. And so a landlord in Queens asked the chatbot whether he can refuse a Section 8 voucher, which is subsidized housing. And a business owner asked whether he can be a cashless business. And in both cases, the chatbot said, yes, you can. You can be a cashless business and you can refuse Section 8 housing tenant. But the law clearly states in New York that you can't. So in this example, who's to blame? Is it the AI? Is it the government, the city, of course? But who within the city? And that example epitomizes the moment we're in now around AI, where everyone here in this room is using AI, right? Same thing's happening in the cities as well. And they're trying to push out new applications of AI to rethink how government's operating. But we're faced with this challenge, right? The example that I just set before. I'm Noam, CEO of Darwin. I've been working with government agencies for the last decade, implementing, adopting AI from early days of deep learning in traffic management space to generative AI and building a foundation for guardrails across governments around AI. And I'd like to spend a few minutes today talking to you about this challenge. How do we move from the example I gave you in New York using AI to one where AI is reimagining how government run and how we as citizens operate and interact with them? But before we do that, let's take a step back to understand take a step back to understand what happened in the last biggest transformation, which was the internet. So in the internet early days for government, it was really just a landing page. But very quickly, right, that changed the way we communicated with government. So our driver's license, no longer do we have to go to a physical location, we could do it online. Same thing, think about your utility bills, which you have to mail in. That was a very big change for us in terms of the channel that we communicated with. But now, when we talk about AI, the transformation's even bigger, because we're not just talking about changing the channel of communication from physical to online, we're talking about actually changing the work itself, where the workflow and all of the red tape that's full in government, right, can be streamlined and being operated with AI, augmenting a lot of the workforce that's limited today. But going back to that first example, one of the things that's the core of government, it's not running a profit center, it's trust, right? We all have to have trust in our government, in our cities to operate, to serve us. And if we ask people around the world today, do you have trust in AI? The answer resoundingly is no. Over 2/3 of people in many of the developing countries say, no, we do not have trust in AI. And so as a government, that poses a really big challenge. How do we start embedding and building AI at scale when there isn't trust at the technology we're trying to put in place? And so this doesn't go unnoticed by the leaders, cities, mayors. They're very aware of it. And what does government do when they have this challenge? They regulate. So in the last few years, we've seen a wave of policy and laws being passed around AI. Across the world, both in Asia, in Europe, US, which is one of our core markets, we've seen a patchwork of AI legislation and rulebook focused on privacy, on risk assessment, cybersecurity. And this is a good foundation to start with. We need these regulations. But reality is that these regulations, in the end, translate into a PDF. And so how many of you here know what page 2 of your employee handbook says? Anyone? Not one hand, right? Me neither. Oh, there's one person. I may ask you later what that is. I don't know what it says. And so that's actually the point. The same thing is happening now around regulation. AI in government as a policy and regulation is a PDF. It is an incident response to a cyber incident. It's at best the do's and don't. And if they're really advanced, maybe it's a 2-hour session on how to responsibly use foundational models. And that gap between how we want AI to serve in government to the need to build trust at the core and the foundation is where we at Darwin are stepping into that gap. So First thing we do in Darwin is we bring AI under control, building a full guardrails and centralized control around all of the policy and compliance the state, city, public agency may have within its environment to be able to have visibility and make sure they have control over their cybersecurity environment. But once we've done that, we get to the fun part of building with them, with that trust, from the bottom up. Agentic workflows that are purposed at the underbelly of government around those red tape, paper-filled operations that we all know that are inside our governments. So let's break it down. Darwin Govern looks at all of the various applications and tools that are being used across our government. So if you think about a government agency, on average in our customer base, we're seeing 60% of those tools being shadow AI. And shadow AI is really those tools that are not sanctioned or approved by the city, meaning they had no awareness that the employees were actually using them. But beyond that is actually understanding what tools, how are those tools being used by which departments, what are the interaction with them, and then of course making sure that those tools are in compliance with the visibility, trust, incident response, cyber that is required by a city like New York or any government entity. And once we've done that, again, we move to the Launchpad, which is where we build the agentic workflows. And as I mentioned, we don't focus on the exotic edge cases, but rather the underbelly of government. So think of a procurement agency or procurement department that spends hours reviewing manually responses from vendors. And all of a sudden, we're able to take that workflow and automate the process to be able to give back time to the purchasing analysts to be able to think about what are the challenges for that response rather than reading 100 pages of response from 14 vendors. Likewise in HR, in most governments agencies we work with, we're seeing a PDF or a fax even in some cases for a new employee coming in that then has to be manually entered into 6 different systems. And so how do we take that disparate systems and streamline them together to be a process that is seamless and doesn't take time from different departments with inefficiency and red tape? Now, just in the last 2 quarters alone, when we look at what that impact has been, we're seeing over 500,000 of AI interactions. So AI is being used across the board in government. But with that use, we've had about 20,000 AI incidents we prevented, meaning where there's been a compliance issue against the laws or regulation that state has put in place that we've been able to prevent and mitigate. And on the back of that, once we've put those guardrails in place, we're seeing that on the Launchpad side, the agentic workflows, 4 hours on average per week per employee, time saved when we're thinking about some of these core foundational streamlined operations that we're building for them. So you may be asking, okay, this is the first inning, what's coming next? And what comes next is that AI is not only going to be something that augments how we work and think about things or streamlines 1 or 2 operations, but rather it becomes the new civil workforce with automation built into it and an extension of our government employees that are already limited in their resources. Now, to some of you here, you may be thinking, okay, so are we losing our humanity? Is government going to become an AI chatbot? But if we do it right and we build trust, visibility, guardrails at the core foundation of it, then we actually give humanity back to the government and our cities of how we want them to operate. Because we free that city clerk, that employee, to move away from the red tape, the paperwork that we're so used to seeing in government, and focusing on how do they actually solve our problems, and letting agentic AI do a lot of the paperwork and drudgery that is now so commonly seen across government. So I'll leave you with this. For the CIOs, government agencies out there, are you ready to envision a world or reimagine where our government is built with AI at its core, and how we operate with government transformed to a place where there's efficiency and AI across all the operations? Thank you, guys.